All right, so looking at our past few weeks, let's see, we've been on the solving quadratic equations for several weeks now, and we've done it by factoring. We've done it by the square root, doing it. We've done greatest common factor, pulling that out of there. We've done it by the what do we call that? Completing the square. Different ways we've done it. Now the last one we're covering is one that I know some of you guys like. So, like on lesson 3 and 4, you're supposed to solve by factoring or solve by the square root method. Some of you were using the quadratic formula. You don't get credit for using the quadratic formula because it said for you to solve by factoring or solve by using the square root method. If it specifically says to use a method, you have to solve that way. You can't just solve it a different way and give me an answer. This lesson is the quadratic formula. So with the quadratic formula, now you can do that. And then next week, we're going to have just basically a quiz over quadratics. I'll give you quadratics, and I'll let you solve them any way you want to. Oh, yeah, we did the difference of two squares. That's another way to solve them. That's kind of a factoring method. But on next week's quiz, you can solve the quadratics in whatever method. You just have to show your work, what you did, show how you did it, but you can use any of these methods that we've studied that you want to. And remember, 2 weeks from today is when the finals due. You'll get the final next Thursday. It'll become available, and it's due 2 weeks from today. So that tells you how close we are to the end of the semester. So if you're missing a bunch of assignments, well, I can't give you the urgency enough to let you know, get things in, because there's not much time left, and your grade's about to be a final grade for the semester. So if you're not happy with where the grade is, now's the time. If you're a procrastinator, it's time to stop procrastinating. And I used to be a procrastinator too. I've gotten a lot better about it just because it causes too much panic when you're way behind. But so this week we're on week 16. Next week is 17, and then the last is just a short week with our final due on the 19th. I got to have grades in by the 21st, so that's didn't hardly count as a week on the 18th. So we really got this week and next week. So we have the notes in practice. Everybody wants to open those up or print those off. You need to have some pencil and paper to take notes, to be able to work sample problems. Remember, any notes you take, you can use on any test, the final, any quiz, anything. And then our assignment is right there, informative. So, all right, let's take a look at the notes for this week. Plain and simple, the quadratic formula. That's all we're studying this week is the quadratic formula. And for those of you who haven't seen it in a while or haven't seen it at all, it's right there. I'm going to write it bigger up here. Negative b plus or minus b squared. This is what x equals. That's what x equals. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so we're looking at that and going, what's all these a's, b's, and c's? We're talking about quadratic equations. Yes. When the quadratic equation is in the standard form, this is the standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. All right. And I'll write that bigger to make sure you can see that. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's where your a, your b, and your c come from for the quadratic formula. So here's the most important, or you'll get it wrong. You're going to get it wrong if you don't pay attention to the most important part of this. It has to be set equal to 0. We're going to get into some down here where there's numbers on the right side, or more than just a number on the right side. Everything has to be moved over to the same side. It has to be equal to 0 to use the quadratic formula. Now, the quadratic formula will solve any and every quadratic equation. In fact, I have a video I'm going to post. It's about 3 or 4 minutes, short video. It's entertaining. It tells you a lot of where my video opening intro comes from. Shows you a lot of that, and it's it's a funny video, 3 or 4 minutes about the quadratic formula. So I'll be posting as soon as class is over. I will post that to Google Classroom. All right. So identify A, B, and C based on this. Substitute them into the formula right here. Simplify it, and that gives you the answers. Must show all work. So we're going to work some examples in class today, and then I will turn you loose because that's all we have. It's just the quadratic formula. So let's start with this simple one right here. We've got x squared plus 2x minus 63. So the A is the coefficient of the x squared. Our coefficient is just a 1. The B is the coefficient of the x term. The x term is right there, plus 2x. So B is positive 2. And C would be the constant. There's no x or x squared attached to that, just the constant. In this case, it's negative 63. So that's our A, that's our B, that's our C. We substitute them into this now. So x equals negative B. So B is a positive, so we'll make it a negative. Plus or minus the square root of B squared. 2 squared. Well, 2 squared is 4. Minus 4, because 4 is just in the formula. Times A. What's A? A is 1. And C is negative 63. And all of it is over 2 times A. A is 1. So it's just over 2. We've done this. Now we just simplify, which just means do the math. Do the math. So it equals negative 2 plus or minus. Let's work on what's underneath here. We got 4 minus 4. So 4. So we need to take 4 times 1 times negative 63. Oh, I didn't close my parentheses. So let's pull up a calculator and make sure we don't mess something up. 4 times 1, we know what that is. It's just 4 times 63 negative. So 4 times 1 times negative 63 equals negative 252. Negative 252, and all of that is over 2. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus what? We need to figure out what this is. So 4 minus a negative. Minus a negative. That means we add them. So that means this is the square root of 256. Well, if we remember last week, we had written down the first, let me move that out of the way. We had written down the first 16 perfect squares. 256 is a perfect square. This was the first 10. This was 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. This equals 16. The square root of 256 is 16. So this equals 16. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus 16 over 2. So to get our answers, we take both cases. It's negative 2 plus 16 over 2. And it's negative 2 minus 16 over 2. Or I'll put an or in between there. So one or the other. Negative 2 plus 16 is 14 over 2. So that means x equals 7. Or negative 2 minus 16 is negative 18 divided by 2. Or negative 9. So x equals 7 or negative 9. Just simplify it. When you got plus or minus, break them out to one of them's plus and one of them's minus. And then simplify that. Negative 2 plus 16 over 2, 7. Negative 2 minus 16 over 2, negative 9. That's how we use the quadratic formula. Set it equal to 0, figure out what your A, B, and C is, substitute it into the formula, and then just simplify it. Just simplify it. Okay, let's move to one a little more complicated start now. Let's go to this one. All right, the first step is it has to be in standard form, which means it needs to be equal to 0. We do not have that. We got negative 2x squared plus 3x equals 4x minus 15. So we need to subtract 4x and add 15 to both sides. Negative 4x, add 15. So this becomes negative 2x squared. We cannot combine anything with x squared unless it also has an x squared. It does not. However, we do have a 3x and a negative 4x. Those are both like terms. They both have an x. So 3x minus 4x is just minus x. And then there's not a constant, so it's just 0. 0 plus 15 equals 0. Now it's in standard form. Negative 2x squared minus 15 plus minus x plus 15. So our A equals negative 2. B equals, what is our B? Negative x. That means our B is negative 1. And our C equals 15. Okay, so if we substitute that into the quadratic formula, negative B, first thing is, look at our formula up here, negative B, and our B is negative 1. So negative 1 is positive 1. Plus or minus square root of B squared. Negative 1 squared is a positive 1 minus 4AC. 4 times A is negative 2. C is 15. All over 2 times A. So all over negative 4. So let's simplify that. X equals 1 plus or minus. What's underneath the square root? 1 minus. So we need to multiply these together first. 4 times 15 is 60. Times negative 2, that's all negative 120. So 1 minus negative 120. Again, subtracting a negative means we add them. So 1 plus 120, 121 over negative 4. Well, again, 121 is one of our perfect squares. That's 11. 11 times 11 is 121. So the square root of that, 1 plus or minus 11 over negative 4. So our x's equal 1 plus 11, which is 12 divided by negative 4. 12 divided by negative 4 is negative 3. Our other answer is 1 minus 11. 1 minus 11 is negative 10. Negative 10 over 4 over negative 4. The negatives cancel out. So that's 10/4, which can simplify to 5/2. And we can leave it as improper fraction. That's the same thing as 2.5, but it's positive. So negative 3. Our answers are negative 3 and 5/2. Because we have to simplify. We can't leave it as 10/4. We're simplifying. That's not the simplest form. 5/2 is the simplest form. All right, let's do one that's missing a term, like this one right here. We got 9x squared minus 1 equals 24. Well, again, we do not have it equal to 0. So let's subtract 24. Subtract 24. Now, again, we can only subtract like terms. We can't take 24 from 9x squared because this is not 24x squared. If it was 24x squared, we could subtract it from 9x squared. It's not. It's only a number. It's only 24. So 9x squared just comes down by itself because there's nothing happened to it. Minus 1 minus 24. That's minus 25 altogether. equals 0 because we canceled out the 24 and the other. 24 minus 24 went away. That's a 0. Okay. So this is one we would normally want to take difference of squares, factor it, and we're done real quick. But our instructions are to use the quadratic formula. So we have to use the quadratic formula. Our A is 9, right? Our A is the term for the x squared. B is the x term. We don't have an x term, so its coefficient is 0. And our C is negative 25. Negative 25. Don't forget, there's a negative out front that goes with the C. If there's a negative out front of the B, it goes with the B. Right? A, B, and C, they may be negative. X equals negative B. Negative B. What's negative is 0, so it's just plus or minus. We don't have to put 0 plus or minus because add anything to 0, you'll just get whatever you added or subtract anything. So B squared, it is important to put B squared in here. It's 0 minus, we can put the 0 out in there for now. When we simplify, we'll get rid of it because the B is 0. 0 plus or minus 0 minus 4 times AC. A is 9, right? So 9. And C is negative 25. And all of that is over 2A. So 2 times 9 for 18. Okay, so we need to simplify. X equals 0 plus. So we can get rid of the 0. Plus or minus the square root of something over 18. We need to do this math. What is 0 minus all of this? We'll bring our calculator back up. Okay. So let's since this is 0, we know we're just subtracting from it. So we'll just take negative 4 times 9. So that's negative 36 times a negative 25 times 25. It's a negative. So this equals 900. It's 0 minus negative 900. So the negative minus the negative is going to cancel out, be 900. So this equals the square root of 900. That is 30 times 30. So we got plus or minus 30 over 18, which means we have 30 over 18 and we have negative 30 over 18. Either way, both of those numbers simplify. We'll go ahead and get this calculator out of the way because we know we can take a 3 out of both of them. 3 goes in 18. We can take a 6 out of both of them. That's probably the best we can do. So 6, if we divide by 6, top and bottom, which means we're just dividing by 1, 6 over 6. Divided by 6 is 5/3. And this one's negative 5/3. So X equals plus or minus 5/3. I can just leave that together like that. Since it's the same number, one's positive, one's negative, I can answer it like that. You can list them separately. There's nothing wrong with saying X equals 5/3 and X equals negative 5/3. But it can save you a step just by saying X equals plus or minus 5/3. Let's see. I got you plenty of practice problems. So there's 3 more on the front page. Here's another page of practice, another page of practice. You don't have to do them all. Just do enough to where you know what you're doing. We're going to let's do one more here on the back. Let's pick a good one. Let's see. Let's do, I don't know the answers to any of these, so I don't know if any of them are harder than any others. Let's do the last one. Just assuming that maybe they got harder as they went on. Okay, so we've got 5x squared plus 9 equals 4x plus 5. Again, it's not set equal to 0, so we got to move everything over. Move the 4x over. Move the 5. There's no x term over here. There's an x squared, but that's not the same. Because if x is 2, 2 is not the same as 4. So 5x squared just stays 5x squared. Negative 4x. There's no other x So it's just negative 4x because up here it's 0x. Since it doesn't list it, it's 0x. So 0x minus 4x is minus 4x. And then we've got 9 minus 5. And equals 0 because 4x minus 4x, 5 minus 5, those are 0 now. So remember, when you bring it over, the numbers go with the numbers. The x's go with, where's the x? It's a 0x. You cannot combine anything if they're not like terms. There's no other x squared term, so I cannot do anything with the x squared. I can only do like terms. All right, so we've got our equal to 0. So our a is equal to 5 because that's our coefficient of the x squared term. Our b is equal to negative 4. So we've got a negative 4 in front of the x. And our c equals 4. All right, x equals negative b. So negative 4. And we'll simplify that. Excuse me. B squared is 16. That's negative 4 squared. Minus 4 times a times c. All over 2a, which is 10. 2 times 5 is 10. So x equals negative 4 is a 4. Plus or minus 16 minus this. 16 minus this. Okay. 4 times 5 is 20 times 8. So 16, let's see. I'm sorry. 4 times 5 is 20 times 4 is 80. 16 minus 80 minus 64 all over 10. 4 plus or minus negative 64, square root of negative 64 over 10. Well, do you remember what we do with a negative 64 there? You say, well, that's not a real number. No, but it is an imaginary number. This is the same as negative 1 times 64. So the square root of 64 is 8. So that's the same as 8 times the square root of negative 1. And if you remember your imaginary numbers, this is I. Square root of negative 1 is equal to I. So this is the same thing as 8I, which makes our answer x equals 4 plus or minus 8I over 10. We can't combine the 4 and the 8 because there's an I attached to 8. It's 8 times I. But we can simplify in the fact that we can take a 2 out of everything. So that's the same thing as 2 plus or minus 4I over 5. So it does simplify a little bit. But that is the final answer. That's as simple as it gets. And we had an imaginary, that's an imaginary answer. So that means if you graph this equation, if you graph this quadratic equation, since all of its answers are both imaginary, means this will not cross the x-axis. It does have 2 x's to solve it, but they're both imaginary. So let's do that, and that's where we're going to end up, just to show what we're talking about. So we're going to put the graph of this up here. Y equals 5x squared minus 4x plus 4. So there's the equation, same equation we have there. We could have typed in the original equation, that would work too, but we set it equal to 0. And look, there it is. It is a quadratic equation. It does make a parabola, but there are no real zeros. There's nowhere that it really equals 0. The lowest it gets, the vertex, is 0.4, 3.2. So this has a range of 3.2 or greater. It has a domain of negative infinity to infinity because it'll keep going both directions. But the range is only from 3.2 to infinity. Does never gets below 3.2. So no real zeros, but we do have the two imaginary zeros, 2 plus 4i over 5 and 2 minus 4i over 5. And again, that's as far as it can be simplified. We can't combine the 4i with any other term. All right. So that's it. Oh, before I kill that, let me go back and show you what our assignment is. All right, let's go to the formatives. So I go to formative and look at, so let's look at what our lesson is. Unit 2, lesson 5. I'm going to hit a preview of it. So it'll open up what you'll see as a student, just to make sure it looks the same. Okay, so when we look at what our lesson is for this week, formative is slowly loading. Come on, form. There we go. Here's our lesson for the week. 5 questions. Solve the following problems using the quadratic formula. Other methods will receive no credit. Again, if you're not doing it by the instructions, you're not getting credit for it. And this is a reminder at the top. I put the quadratic formula here for you and the standard form of the quadratic equation. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is not equal to 0, because if a was 0, you wouldn't have a quadratic formula, a quadratic equation, pardon me. All right, so then you have 5 problems. Right there. You have 5 problems to work using the quadratic formula. I have show your work buttons. When you click on that, it'll remind you what is the A, what is the B, is the C, so you can put those in there. You can type them if you want to by hitting the type button. So I can just type right there what it is. It's, whatever. Or you can use your scribble and just use your pen to draw it, your answer. But show all your work and solve it for X. Tell me what the final X's are for that solution. So that's it. 5 problems, all with the quadratic formula. All right. Anyone got any questions? I'm happy to answer them. You put them in the chat. You turn your microphone. Somebody else may have the other question already. All right. I will post that video I was telling you about on Google Classroom in just a few minutes. So look for that. Kind of talks about the quadratic formula. It's hopefully humorous. I made it a couple of years ago, but I use it all the time. And we will get everything. We'll get everything graded as soon as we can this week. I'm trying to keep on top of grades because next week, let's see. Oh, this is Algebra 2. I'm sorry. Algebra 2, we don't have any exemptions. I say next week exemptions have to be determined, but this class is not one you can exempt. So, all right. Well, I will let you go. We will have a great week. It is an A day for Friday.
Let's get out of here. Word to your multiples. Math, baby.